Hello folks, I'm L.A. Little and this is your daily TA wrap, where we take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical TA perspective, asking ourselves each time what happened today and what does it tell us about tomorrow. I do the show 4 times a week, Monday through Thursday, live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the base of what is still a very snowy Rocky Mountains. Folks, 3 days to start the year, 3 days down to start the year. I haven't really seen anybody get that worried yet, but I remember last year we started up big on the first day and never looked back. We didn't start down big this time, but we certainly didn't start up. There's still profit taking going on. If we pull up the, not the charts, but the quotes here, you can see, and I've got, to start the day here, I've got the sectors up. And you can see a clear kind of movement to stuff that is quote-unquote safe, right? I mean, you're going into bonds, you're going into junk bonds, you're going to utilities, compared it to like the IYT, the SMH, and so forth, right? So money is just not exactly excited about going into stocks yet. Now, we're not having any big sell-offs. I'm pulling up the Dow. You can see on the Dow 2 big ones in terms of positions going higher. Was your bank stocks. The bank stocks are going to report starting, I think it's first of next week they'll start. I don't think there's any this week. Alcoa is on Thursday. But Microsoft leading the down board. So anyway, let's go to the closing quotes here, and then let's pop over and look at some of the what took place today. So the Dow was down 44, almost 45, 16,425. The S&P's down 4.5, 1826 and 3/4. Composite down 18 1/4, 4113.5. The NDX down 11 3/4, 3527. And the Russell, the big loser today, 1147, down almost 9, 0.75%. Gold, silver, everything else up slightly after hours. It looks like that must be a bad quote. I don't think oil is up that much. Let me take a look over here. Yeah, I've got an old symbol in there. What is that? That's 14M. And I need to get a different one in there. Oil was actually down today, so up a little bit after hours, but nothing like this. So the dollar was down a little bit. Nothing real big, right? You just had more. I guess you would call it profit taking. I'm not sure what else to call it to start the year. And if we look at the charts, what we got happening is we essentially have a market that's stretched. We talked about this quite a bit, that we were stretching up not only on the whole year, but right up until the end of the year. And if you go back and you look at these charts and you take a look at the way that stretch took place, I mean, the last few days of the year, it was just, stretched all the way up, right? First day of the year down, slightly down the next, down a little bit more today. But we haven't even got back to the retest regen zone yet. And so if we come back into here, I mean, our zone is in here. We're not there, right? Those highs, they're not that far away, but there's still a few points. 1813 is the lowest. I mean, the highest one. 1811 is the other one. We got as low as about 1821, I think, today. 1823. So, this thing could go 10 points down from today's low and just finally get back to do a retest regen. Volume's not heavy. It's not like people are throwing things out or anything. Just drifting back in. If I look at the other markets, I'll go to the other listed issue, the Dow. The Dow's even stronger. The Dow has been the strongest one. You can see here, still hanging up there, heading, hardly giving anything up. Moving over to the weakest, the Russell. The Russell was the first to come back and do the retest regen on the way back. And so on the Russell, you did the retest regen here on the second. And what does that mean? That means you were coming back into a high. That's where it tries to retest and regenerate back the other way. How do you measure that? Well, you look at the volume on the bar that broke out. You look at the volume on the high, which there was none. And then you pop over, and I believe that was that December, it's the 29th, so it wasn't Thanksgiving. And then you pop over and you look at how it came back. Well, it came back with more volume. What does that mean? Well, it means it's probably going to try it again. And lo and behold, that's what's happening. The volume's picking up even more, which says it's going to try to get back into this. There was two big bars on the way up. One was the Fed bar. That was the December 18th bar. The other one was the quadruple witching. That was, the last big volume day of the year. It was December 20th. Top of that, guys, 1147. We're at 1146.97 on the lows. So we're coming right back into it. Going to pop into it again tomorrow and try to get into it. Potentially get into the bottom of the swing point high and try to do a full retest and regenerate on the backside. Today we got a joiner. In other words, somebody else came down and did the same thing. The NDX. Now the NDX we knew had the best chance because it had Apple in it and Apple was struggling. And the NDX comes in and does the retest, and what does it do? It pops back out the other side. Volume over here 17.1, volume on the breakout, and it just so happens here the breakout is the quadruple witching. Huge volume. You come into it, you don't have enough volume. That doesn't look like it wants to give it up, does it? And then if we take a look at what it did, it left a little bit of a tail. Volume was decent on the way down though, so we may get some further testing in the morning. The problem with tonight, and I'll look at some more data overseas and so forth, but the problem with tonight is you have mixed signals. It looks to me like last night, I'm trying to remember what I said, but I believe I said it looked to me like we were going to do some more testing and then try to bounce. And we came in, we're doing more testing. I suspect we're going to try to bounce from here. A lot of that depends on Europe. Let me look at the NASDAQ composite first, and then we'll pop over and look at Europe. So if I look at the composite's coming back in. There's a gap area there. The quad witching is 411.93. We got the 411. We got the 401.03. So we actually popped into the quad witching. We closed the gap, right? Flipped back around. Not much of a flip, but flipped back around. They sold it off at the end of the day. It was actually going to try to hold that range up there, but it didn't. So can we test some more? Yeah. Do we have something that's big that's going to be hard to get over? Yeah. It's going to be hard to get over this. In other words, get underneath this and get all the way back to actually do the retest regen. It appears to me, just looking at the indexes, that they want to bounce. Now, let's look at Europe, because I think Europe is going to be the primary mover. If we do test lower, I suspect it will come first thing in the morning, and it will come off of Europe if it does. Here's the CACs. We've talked about the CACs before. Remember, the CACs was the one, if you go back and you look at it, the CACs was the one that broke down these multiple swing points, but then it went all the way back up and didn't settle, didn't die, retest and regenerate back down, right? So instead of regenerating down, the crazy thing went all the way back up to the swing point high almost. Then you got first day of the year, they sell it off. Big smack, another big wide price spread bar just like this one. Not huge volume, right? But wide price spread. Tries to bounce again today. Resistance coming right into it here. Can't even quite get into it. Ugly bar. This is gonna try to break in the morning. And how it trades is going to be a big indication of how we open. And it appears to me that there's going to be a good chance this thing's going to try to trade down to that area. And let me pop this in here so we can see it. So their big bar on the quad witching day for us, 4,200. And 4,200 looks to be the number, that it's trying to come into, right into here. And I suspect it's going to probably get there. You don't really have, the way I count ABCD structures, that's not one. It's not going to set up one because it actually got a lower low today. So it just looks to me like it's going to try to come into this bar, and that's probably where it bounces from. Now, does it do that first thing in the morning? Probably does. Does it bounce by the time we open? Don't know. I think that will be the issue with us, whether we open up or we open down. I do think we're going to try to bounce tomorrow, though, and it will be a factor of whether we, what you'd really like to see is you'd like to see Europe under pressure, open us down so you could buy it, right, and try to trade it on the upside. But that will be the factor in my mind. If we look at the strongest index in Europe, it's certainly the DAX of the large ones. The DAX couldn't do anything either. Couldn't bounce, couldn't get anything going, no volume, just hanging. And the FTSE actually is doing better than the other two. It's just hanging up there with not any kind of sell-off, really. It's just gyrating at the top. If I look overseas, Asia, Nikkei, they had like a week off, and they finally opened up. They opened down about 2.5%. That's just going to try to come back and do a retest, regen. Everybody's doing it, right? Anybody that was up at or at highs, right, is trying to come back and do a retest and try to regenerate back up. Taipei, the Taiwan market, that's what they're doing. And I could probably find 2 or 3 other ones. You do have some that are struggling, though. China's struggling, and China is pushing down again. And it looks to me like China will try to bounce out of here. You got a suspect break on the swing point low, but this chart, at best it's a big range trade at this point. And I covered all those last night. If you want, go back and review those to get an idea. If I pop over and look at the major sectors, I was looking today. I mean, the XLF has been strong, and this is one of the reasons the SPX has held up so well, and the Dow and as well. It's because the large cap financials, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, AXP, there's a bunch of them. They've all been just grinding higher into the earnings reports that start up next week. And that grind higher has been pulling the XLF. XLF is a huge part of the S&P 500 weighting wise, and those big cap stocks are holding it up. But if I go look, and if you remember, let me find it here we go. If you remember, the KRE, which is a broader measure of the financial sector, is going the other way. And so if I pull that one up, you can see how it is selling off in a much more deliberate fashion, even though the XLF is going up. So it's telling you that you got a very narrow advance taking place on that XLF, really in the money center banks. And so, is this horrible? Is this going to cause all kind of, well, not really. I mean, it looks to me like it's going to come back down here and try to test one more time. But it's, the divergence between these two is pretty strong. XLF's doing this guy's doing that. And that's, one of them's wrong. And I suspect what's happening is you're getting that push up into earnings, and they're probably going to sell the earnings, which is week and a half out. But until then, they can push it, and that's what they're trying to do. All right, let's pop over to the OX markets. I see a few questions, so I'll come back and grab those here, and then I'll talk, if I have time at the end of the night, on a couple other thoughts. If we pop over to these, I noticed today gold. Gold, for some reason, got dumped. Somebody dumped a bunch of contracts in the futures. It drove this thing down, and it lasted all for about 15 minutes max, and it was already back up where it was. In the process, though, it's amazing how they do this stuff. Why did that dump? I have no idea. But in the process, it actually did the test that we were talking about last night. 117.29. The other bar over here is 117.50. This thing got down to 117.11, so it got underneath them and had less volume. That tells me that they're going to try to test this high tomorrow. And so the gold just isn't quite done yet. And if I look at silver, silver itself looks even stronger. So the precious metals, for whatever reason, they couldn't find a buyer last year. This year, they're up pretty strong and they're holding still, which is an about face. Bonds was a worry about a week ago. The question was, were they going to break? They actually did break, but they couldn't accelerate down. If you can't break it down, especially in a case where you have a high probability break, which is what this was. You had swing points here. You had swing point on the weekly that broke as well. Get underneath it, but you can't stay under it, right? These two bars keep coming up, and so what do? They pop it back the other way. Now, I don't think it's going to go very far, right? But they don't want to break it. They just can't let it break down here. Interest rates on the 10-year at 3%, that's kind of a key number. They don't want to give that up. And that's what's happening here. I mean, there's enough buying support coming in here. Part of it is short covering, part of it is people saying, okay, 3% is a good rate, and part of it probably is, the Fed starting to push money back into the system again today, and that's probably part of what's going on here today. So bonds not breaking down, again, that's positive for the equity markets as long as that continues. The only other thing I saw today was, where was it? No. DBA. It's nothing yet, nothing big yet. But you got a wide price spread bar yesterday, you got another one today. Volume, it tested the bottom yesterday. Now this has been on a long downtrend, but if you remember, let me pull this back so that you can see the weekly on it. Oops, grabbed the wrong thing there. Here we go. On the weekly, remember we set lows, got some good buying interest on the way back up here. And I know there were some folks that were asking about it, interested in it. That pushes up, right? But then lo and behold, all the way back down, and this is very normal for a market that's been this weak this long, right? This week this long, you can expect it's going to do more testing. That's what it's doing. It tested here on the weekly, had more volume. So what does it do? It tests again. That's this week starting today. We'll see what the volumes end up being. If you look at it on the daily, it actually went under back over. Unfortunately, it's so far up, you hate to buy it here because you're going to have to give it way too much. But this thing's going right back in to do a retest and try to regenerate lower. Looks to me like it's not going to, and it's going to go up here and take these highs out, or at least go test them. So for whatever reason, ag is starting to turn, just like we see some of the others. Which brings me to the last chart, or actually I see a question on UNG, so I'll do that one too while I'm here. Which brings me to oil. Oil has been getting beat up pretty bad. Came down today, it actually got underneath on Friday, underneath this big bar from December 3rd. The volumes aren't here. It's trying to turn, but boy, it is struggling down here. We'll see if it can get a bounce. It looks to me like oil's going to try to bounce, and that brings me to the UNG, which I see a question. Could it come back in a little bit more? So the question is, will it retrace more? I know that this is Dan asking the question over in the chat room here, and let's see, because he was riding this thing along, and I think he got out, and he's wanting to get back in at some point. Well, then it did the test, and it held. So here's your low, and so the only way you can trade this now is you buy it here where it is. You put your stop right up underneath it. You just don't give it anything, because if it breaks through there, well, you could have this bar hold it actually. So I would put my stop underneath the high of, what is this bar? This is the December 5th bar. That top is 2025. You're at 2106. So you want to buy it as close as possible. The reason I'm saying it looks like the buy here is it got underneath the December 31st bar. It got underneath it on the 3rd, which was Friday, and flipped back around with less volume. I would try to buy it right in there and put a tight stop on it underneath the highs. If it gets under those, it's going to probably get all the way back down to here, so you might as well just stop out up there. All right, let's take some of your questions here and see what I can do for you. All right, so the first one is weight. I want to buy at about 21. How does it look to you? Oh, W-A-I-R, not weight, but where. So let's pop over and see what these look like. Okay, so where is, what is this? This is a aircraft, Westco Aircraft Holdings. And so they supply, this is industrial equipment. So you had a big bar up. Okay, I still got this on the weekly. Good. All right. This is an interesting chart. It's a little thin. So you're doing, 150, 200,000 a day. Well, you got a couple things going on. First of all, in neoclassical, you know that when you come back to do a retest and regenerate off a prior swing point high, if it takes more than 6 bars to get back there, which this one's doing, it's a high probability buy. Let's see, that low today was 21.17. This high was 21.07. And the breakout bar was here. I think you'll get right at that 21 price point. Is that what you were asking me? Yeah, 21. Yeah, I think that's where you buy and you put your stop just up underneath it. Look at your ATR. It's 2085 is this low. Look at your ATR, see what it looks like. I suspect you're going to want to stop around 2061 or so, just glancing at the chart and assuming what the ATR looks like. So you give it about 30-40 cents and you're shooting for the top again. $2. Yeah, it looks like a decent trade. Dave on where Westco Aircraft. Okay, Feedy wants to look at MO. Somebody else looked at this last night if I remember right. Oops, let's get the right thing in here. So what do we got here? So this is Altria. Oh boy, it came back, didn't it? Okay, so the issue here, there's two things going on, and somebody asked me about it last night, and it looked like a pretty good place to try to buy it. Looks like it was a little bit early to buy it there though, because it actually got all the way back into this low on the high volume bar, which is the quad witching bar right from December 18th. That low's 37.19, got to 37.19 right on it. Yeah, you don't have to hardly give it anything now. The worrisome part, and I saw this after I said whatever I said last night. I was looking at it again this morning because a member was asking about it, and then I forgot to mention it to him, unfortunately. But you've got a bunch of swing point lows down here. So as it comes back into this area, which is where it is, right, you don't want to give it much room. If it starts to break here, you've got to get out. So yeah, it's still buyable here. I would have rather seen today lighter volume, even though it was lighter than here. Just barely. Looks to me like it will test it again tomorrow, and if it has no volume tomorrow and holds, then that's your buy with a tight stop, probably using tomorrow's low plus an ATR percentage off of it as your stop. So, and the thing you like about it, it's got volume at the top. It's going to try to go back up there at some point. I suspect what you have is a big range. And let me get it up over here and see what it looks like real quick on the weekly. Yeah, I think you got a big range, and it's just testing back into this. It could test as low on the weekly. It could test as low as 36.53, which is those lows. So, you know, I just wouldn't give it much underneath there, because if it starts to break, it's going to break bad. Microsoft broke down today. Microsoft, we all know, is the big software maker. All kinds of stuff related to software and even hardware. I wouldn't mess with it until it gets down here, and then, you know, one of the things we're starting to notice, and I'm sure you're starting to notice it, is you're starting to line up swing point lows together. Now, we don't have them over here on the weeklies yet. You know, they're just not here yet. But they are on the dailies, which means you could get a faster move down. This is setting up some sort of a larger ABCD structure to the downside, or at least trying to, right? Which would get it quite a bit lower if it breaks. You got this nice big volume support here, but this would be the second time to test it, right? If it comes in and test it. I'd probably look somewhere else rather than look at Microsoft. I don't like the way that chart looks. QQQs came in, did their test today. I kind of talked about them on the beginning. They're doing a retest, regen. Looks to me like they're going to bounce. So that's the same thing as the NDX I talked about. Will the SPY or VXF, all stocked by the S&P 500, which is the VXF, when it makes markets push up? When and if markets push up. So I guess you're asking me, would those be good vehicles? I believe is the question. So the question is would the SPY, and I'll put this on a daily so I can get them both up, VXF, would these be good vehicles if and when the market starts to turn? Yeah, I mean, if you want to buy the strongest stuff, and you know, these have been strong. The issue, and this will allow me to digress for a second here. The issue is that you have to ask yourself, what kind of a move back up will you get, right? After last year, everybody, I'm sure, assumes you get the retrace and you go all the way back up, you make new highs. Okay? That's what everybody's assuming. I don't know that that's going to be the case. Right? I mean, I'm not convinced that's going to be the case. Here you've already got an ABCD structure that finished. You got another one that's in place now that goes from here to there, and it's coming back now, which also could take it higher. The issue in my mind is, does this really happen, right? I've said all along, towards the end of January, if you look at the dates, that's a period where I think you could see some problems. Now, we're not at the end of January, but we are through the first week already, right? I mean, you know, we're on the 6th. So I'm thinking another week and a half, 2 weeks maybe, you know, this market could struggle. And so I'm not certain it's going to break higher. So I wouldn't just jump to that conclusion. When I say these are high probability trades when they come back, you know, to me that says that these things are going to bounce, right? Now, what is a bounce? Well, a bounce could be there. That could be it. It doesn't mean it has to go all the way back up here. So when you ask me that question, you know, my answer is somewhat couched in the bigger scheme of, you know, what is that bounce? What is that form going to take? Is it going to come up here and fail, and we're going to get something up here, or is it actually going to break out? You want to position in the trend. I don't disagree with you there at all, right? I agree with you 100%. That's where you want to position, but I don't know if it's going to make new highs, and we won't know that until it starts to go back up, and we see how, you know, the big bar down is going to be the bar, the January 2nd bar. That's going to be the test on the way back up, and that's where we'll find out. Which of the two would be stronger? I think, you know, looking at the two, I would probably just stick with the domestic one. I'd probably stick with the S&P. Yeah, they look almost equal, but I think the S&P is a little bit stronger. Okay. All right. Tomorrow's Tuesday. Fed meeting. Decision on Wednesday. ECB, BOE Thursday. Unemployment numbers Friday. Earnings starting to hit. A lot of stuff happening this week. First week of full trading. Volumes didn't expand that much today. I'll be looking to see whether that's a function of the fact that we were coming down that they didn't expand, or is it just lighter volumes, this week. I would think those volumes pick up, and if they do, you want to see them pick up to the upside if you're bullish, and we'll see how that plays out. So I'm going to leave it at that, and as always, thanks. I appreciate you being there. I will catch you tomorrow night. We'll do it all again. I'm L.A. Little. This is and was your daily TA wrap. Have yourself a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, folks.